The MMA celebrity saw a soldier frozen in ceremony, a perfect prop for his viral video. But he was blind to the battle-hardened warrior beneath the flawless uniform. And that blindness was about to be corrected in one devastatingly silent move. The late afternoon sun bled across the Virginia sky, casting a solemn, golden light over Arlington National Cemetery. Rows of immaculate white headstones stood in silent, unending formation, a marble army stretching towards the horizon. A profound quiet hung in the autumn air, broken only by the distant whisper of wind through ancient oaks and the sharp, metronomic cadence of polished leather on stone. Click, clack, click, 21 steps. A pause so absolute it felt like the world held its breath. A turn, executed with the precision of a fine watch mechanism. Another pause, 21 seconds of unwavering stillness. Then 21 steps again. Sergeant Liam O'Connell, his 30-year-old frame encased in the immaculate dress blues of the old guard, moved as if carved from the very discipline he represented. His face was a mask of stoic resolve, jaw set, his ice blue eyes fixed on a point beyond the living world, a gaze that held the weight of things unseen. The M14 rifle on his shoulder was not a prop. It was an extension of his being, the bayonet a sliver of cold fire in the dying light. This was the tomb of the unknown soldier, a hallowed ground where silence spoke louder than any anthem, and Sergeant O'Connell was its guardian. For the hushed crowd gathered behind the velvet ropes, he was a symbol. For Liam, this duty was a sacred pact, a silent conversation with ghosts. Crashing into this sanctity came a wave of noise and swagger. Inferno Leo Vance, a titan of the MMA world, moved through the crowd like a shark parting a school of fish. His custom-made tracksuit, emblazoned with the roaring chimera logo of his brand, clung to a physique sculpted for brutal efficiency. A diamond stud, a gift from a high-profile sponsor, glittered in his ear. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a global brand, a viral phenomenon with millions of followers hanging on his every word and every knockout. Flanking him was his entourage. Kyle, the wiry cameraman already framing shots with his state-of-the-art camera, and two hulking acolytes, aspiring fighters named Marco and Dean, their matching Inferno gear screaming allegiance. Leo stopped just shy of the rope, his posture radiating the aggressive confidence of a man who lived his life in a cage, dominating opponents. He studied Liam with the predatory assessment of a pre-fight stare-down, a smirk playing on his lips. The crowd, a mix of reverent families, curious tourists, and veterans lost in memory, sensed the shift in atmosphere. A sacrilege was brewing. All right, check it out, Inferno Nation. Leo's voice, amplified for his audience, both present and digital, shattered the peace. He gestured dismissively at the stoic sentinel. We're live here at Arlington, and we're about to drop some knowledge on real-world combat versus, well, this. He swept his hand toward Liam, who continued his patrol, seemingly oblivious. Look at this guy. A statue, rooted to the spot. That rifle is just dead weight, kills all mobility. This is pageantry, folks, not preparedness. He bounced on the balls of his feet, his body a coiled spring of kinetic energy. In my gym, we teach explosive power, dynamic movement, the science of combat. This, he scoffed, shaking his head with theatrical pity, is a parade. It's for show. The crowd murmured. A father in a Marine Corps sweatshirt pulled his son a little closer, his brow furrowed in disapproval. A few teenagers, however, looked intrigued, their phones already up and recording. Leo's crew grinned, feeding his ego. Teach him, champ, Marco barked, his voice a little too loud. Leo dropped into a perfect MMA fighting stance, low and wide, hands raised, chin tucked. See this? This is how a warrior stands, he declared, his voice ringing with authority. Balanced, ready to explode in any direction, to strike or defend. Not locked in place like some museum piece. The rhythmic click of Liam's boots was the only reply. Each step a measured heartbeat in the hallowed silence. The air around the sentinel seemed to grow colder, denser, a zone of compressed stillness that was the very opposite of weakness. As Leo continued his performance, a calm but resolute voice cut through his monologue. "Young man, that's quite enough." A woman stepped forward from the crowd. She appeared to be in her late 60s, dressed in the simple blue blazer of a cemetery volunteer, but her posture was ramrod straight, and her eyes, a sharp, intelligent gray, held a command that decades of civilian life hadn't softened. She was Captain Eva Rostova, retired, formerly of the Army's Intelligence Corps, a woman who had faced down far more dangerous men than a boastful cage fighter. Leo, momentarily surprised, quickly recovered, seeing her as another character in his unfolding drama. "Whoa there, ma'am. With all due respect, I'm just providing a little expert analysis for my viewers," he said, flashing a smile designed to disarm. "Just comparing disciplines. There is nothing to compare," Eva stated, her tone even but edged with steel. "You're looking at a serving soldier of the United States Army, not a sparring partner. The discipline you're mocking as stillness is forged in environments you can't begin to comprehend. It is control, not weakness." Leo let out a short, incredulous laugh. He turned back to Kyle's camera, winking. "You hear that, Inferno Nation? She thinks this fella's a threat." He pivoted back to Eva, his tone dripping with condescension. "Ma'am, I appreciate your service, but I'm the reigning UFC light heavyweight champion. I have endorsement deals worth more than the GDP of a small country. I train with the best killers on the planet. I know what a threat looks like." He gestured again at Liam, who was now executing another flawless turn. "This is a man trained to walk in a straight line. It's respectable, sure, but it's not combat." The crowd was now fully invested. The veteran in the Marine Corps sweatshirt was shaking his head slowly, a look of grim anticipation on his face. The teenagers were now live streaming, whispering excitedly. "This is going to be epic," one of them muttered. A young woman studying the scene with intense, critical eyes told her friend, "This guy is a walking embodiment of toxic masculinity." Kyle, the cameraman, zoomed in, capturing the tense exchange. "Pure gold," he whispered to Marco. Leo's ego, stoked by the attention, swelled. He began demonstrating a series of lightning-fast shadowboxing combinations, his fists blurring, his footwork impeccable. "Speed, agility, power," he narrated, each word a punch. "These are the pillars of survival. Look at him," he said, pointing a thumb at Liam. "Feet together, hands occupied, center of gravity all wrong. In a real fight, he'd be on the ground in under 2 seconds." Fact. Eva Rostova took another step forward, her voice dropping to a low, serious warning. "You are standing on sacred ground. This tomb honors soldiers who gave everything, anonymously. These sentinels are their living monument. They're trained to protect this place with their lives." Leo shrugged, unfazed. "I get the symbolism, I do. Total respect for the fallen. But we're talking physics and biomechanics here. And that stance is a liability." His voice rose again as he addressed the whole plaza. "In my world, stillness is death. Movement is life. Let me show you." He began to approach the velvet rope, ignoring a uniformed security officer who was now hurrying towards him, speaking urgently into his radio. Eva's voice cracked like a whip, sharp and final. "I am telling you, son, you are misjudging the man you see. The stillness you mock is the discipline of a warrior who has learned to master chaos. You see a ceremony. I see a predator at rest." Her words, meant as a final warning, acted as a trigger. For a man like Leo Vance, being told he misjudged a fight was the ultimate challenge. The cemetery security officer, a stout man with a firm set to his jaw, arrived at the rope. "Sir, I need you to step back. You're creating a disturbance and distracting the sentinel." Leo waved a dismissive hand, not even bothering to look at him. "Relax, officer. Class is in session. I'm almost done." He shot a conspiratorial grin at his camera. "You all wanted a real-world demonstration, right?" He boomed to the crowd. "Theory is one thing, but application is everything. In the fight game, we call this a pressure test. You find a weakness, and you exploit it. You push until it breaks." He locked his gaze onto Liam's chest, his fighter's brain calculating angles and impact points. "Don't do it, young man." Eva's voice rang out again, no longer calm, but sharp with alarm. "You are about to make a mistake that will follow you for the rest of your life." For a fleeting microsecond, a flicker of doubt crossed Leo's face. He saw the genuine urgency in the old woman's eyes. But then the roar of the crowd, both real and imaginary, flooded his senses. The millions of followers, the championship belt, the persona of Inferno Leo Vance. It was all on the line. He couldn't back down now. His ego, a carefully constructed fortress, slammed its doors shut on reason. "It's controlled, ma'am. I'm a professional," he said, the confidence returning to his voice. "I know exactly what I'm doing." He turned his full attention to Liam, who stood motionless at the end of his 21-step path, the living embodiment of immovable duty. "No disrespect, brother," Leo said, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "But this is for educational purposes. This is why a modern combat athlete will always have the edge over ceremonial tradition." He settled into his stance, sinking his weight, his hands poised like twin cobras. The air grew thick and heavy. The crowd held a collective breath. Even Kyle lowered his camera slightly, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. This was no longer just content. A line was about to be crossed. Leo moved. It was the explosive, breathtaking speed that had won him titles. A blur of motion, a study in practiced, violent grace. His left fist shot forward in a perfectly executed straight punch, aimed directly at Sergeant O'Connell's sternum. It was a controlled strike, not a knockout blow, but delivered with the pinpoint accuracy of a world-class martial artist. It was designed to demonstrate a point, to make the Sentinel stumble, to prove his theory of combat superiority. The sound of the impact was a sickening, flat thud that echoed across the silent marble, a sound of profound violation. The fabric of Liam's uniform rippled, and his body absorbed the force with a barely perceptible sway. But his feet did not move. He did not flinch. A thin, bright trickle of blood appeared at the corner of his mouth, the only outward sign that the blow had landed with force. Leo stepped back, a triumphant smirk already forming, ready to turn to the crowd and declare victory. But the smirk died before it was born. The change was instantaneous and terrifying. One moment, Sergeant Liam O'Connell was a monument. The next, he was a weapon. His ice-blue eyes, which had been fixed on some distant, unseen horizon, shifted. They locked onto Leo Vance with a focus so intense, it was almost physical, a predator's gaze that was utterly devoid of emotion. It was the look of a man switching from a state of ceremonial reverence to one of absolute combat readiness. The M14 rifle seemed to fall from his shoulder, but it was a controlled, deliberate release, hitting the marble plaza with a sharp, metallic clatter that made the crowd jump. Before Leo's brain could even process that sound, before he could raise his hands to defend, Liam moved. There was no flashy technique, no wasted motion. It was the brutal, sublime economy of a man trained to end a threat, not to score points. Liam's right hand, fingers slightly curled and rigid as iron, shot forward in a short, sharp arc. It wasn't a punch. It was a targeted strike, a move from an advanced military combative system, aimed with surgical precision at the soft, vulnerable area just below Leo's throat, where the collarbones meet. Simultaneously, his left hand shot up, not to strike, but to cup the back of Leo's neck, controlling his posture and preventing any retreat. The impact of a strike to his clavicle notch sent a blinding, electric shockwave through Leo's entire nervous system. His breath, his arrogance, his consciousness, it all left him in a single, violent gasp. He couldn't breathe. His vision tunneled. As his body went limp from the shock, Liam's knee came up in a short, vicious, and perfectly placed strike to the peroneal nerve on the outside of Leo's thigh. The leg went dead instantly. Leo's world dissolved. His knees buckled, and he collapsed to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut, landing in a heap of designer sportswear and shattered pride. He curled into a fetal position, wheezing, desperately trying to draw a breath that wouldn't come. The replica championship belt he wore for show clattered against the marble, a hollow, tinny sound. The crowd gasped as one. A collective intake of horrified breath. Phones dropped from nerveless fingers. Kyle's camera was forgotten, pointing uselessly at the sky. Marco and Dean, the two acolytes, froze in place, their faces pale with shock, any thought of intervention erased by the terrifying efficiency of what they had just witnessed. Sergeant O'Connell stepped back, his movements now calm and deliberate, and retrieved his rifle. He resumed his position of parade rest, his face once again an impassive mask, the only evidence of the violent exchange, the blood on his lip and the crumpled form of the MMA champion at his feet. For a long moment, absolute silence reigned over the plaza, broken only by Leo's ragged, desperate gasps for air. Sergeant O'Connell stood at his post, a statue of blue and white, his breathing perfectly even. The contrast between his lethal calm and the wheezing heap of the fallen champion was chilling. The crowd stared, mouths agape, trying to reconcile the ceremonial guard of a moment ago with the ruthlessly efficient soldier who had just neutralized a world-class fighter in less than 2 seconds. Captain Eva Rostova moved forward, her voice cutting through the stunned silence, calm and authoritative. "What you have just witnessed," she announced to the silent, staring crowd, "was not a fight. It was a threat assessment and neutralization. It was a lesson." She gestured towards Liam, who remained as still as the tomb he guarded. "These sentinels are not actors. They are not ceremonial props. They are active duty soldiers handpicked from the 3rd U.S. Infantry Regiment, the Old Guard. They are the best of the best." She paused, letting her words sink in, her gaze sweeping over the shocked faces. "Sergeant O'Connell," she continued, her voice filled with a quiet pride, "did not learn that move in a parade drill. Before being selected for this honor, he served 2 combat tours. He is a decorated member of the U.S. Army Special Forces, a Green Beret. He has operated behind enemy lines in Syria. The stillness you saw, the discipline Mr. Vance so arrogantly mocked, was forged in situations where a single misplaced step, a single uncontrolled breath, meant death." A wave of understanding, mixed with awe, washed over the crowd. The veteran in the Marine Corps sweatshirt nodded slowly, a look of profound respect on his face. "You don't see what you see in the dojo or the ring," Eva explained, her voice softening slightly as she looked down at the now recovering Leo. "That wasn't a technique to score points. It was a CQC, close quarters combat, maneuver designed for one purpose: to end a threat with maximum efficiency and minimal exposure. He was trained to react and eliminate a threat in under half a second. Not for applause, for survival." The wail of sirens grew closer as security and military police vehicles converged on the scene. 2 MPs, their uniforms crisp and their demeanor all business, stepped onto the plaza and assessed the situation with practiced eyes. The lead officer nodded curtly to Liam. "Situation contained, Sergeant?" "Affirmative," Liam replied, his voice low and steady, the first word he had spoken. The MP then turned his attention to Leo, who was now being helped to a sitting position by the cemetery security guards, still clutching his throat and wincing in pain. "Sir," the MP said, his tone leaving no room for argument, "you are under arrest for assaulting a federal officer on duty. On these grounds, that's a very serious offense." Leo, his face a mask of pain, confusion, and dawning humiliation, didn't resist. As they helped him to his feet, he looked at Liam, who had not moved a muscle. "Ow!" Leo rasped, the single word a universe of disbelief. "How did you—" Sergeant O'Connell's ice-blue eyes met his for a brief, searing moment. He broke his silence for the second and final time, his voice quiet but carrying across the plaza with absolute clarity. "You were looking at the uniform," he said, "not the soldier." The words hung in the air, a simple, devastating epitaph for Leo Vance's arrogance. As the MPs escorted a limping and humbled Leo Vance towards a waiting vehicle, the crowd began to stir, the spell of shocked silence breaking into hushed, reverent whispers. The lesson delivered was more profound than any plaque or guidebook could offer. Captain Rostova addressed the remaining onlookers one last time. "The tomb of the unknown soldier is a promise," she said, her voice resonating with deep emotion. "A promise that we will never forget the ultimate sacrifice." The Sentinels embody that promise. Their silence is not empty. It is full of respect. Their discipline is their tribute. From the back of the police vehicle, Leo looked out at the endless rows of white headstones. His throat ached, his leg throbbed, but the deepest pain was in his shattered ego. He had come here for content, for clicks, to prove the superiority of his brand of controlled violence. Instead, he had been dismantled by a form of strength he never knew existed, a quiet, unshakable power forged not for glory, but for duty. He had spent his life fighting for championships, for money, for fame. He now realized, with a clarity that was both painful and liberating, that Sergeant O'Connell fought for something infinitely bigger. "I was fighting for a belt," he muttered to himself, the words tasting like ash. He was fighting for them. The crowd dispersed slowly, changed. A father knelt beside his young son, pointing towards the lone sentinel resuming his solitary march. "See that, buddy?" he said softly. "That's what a real tough guy looks like. Not the ones who make the most noise, but the ones who stand their ground quietly." 1 month later, in a sprawling state-of-the-art MMA gym in Las Vegas, Leo Vance stood before his top students. The usual high-energy rap music was absent. The gym was quiet. Behind him, on a giant screen that usually displayed fight highlights, was a single, high-resolution photograph of the tomb of the unknown soldier. His championship belt was nowhere in sight. "I thought I knew what strength was," Leo said, his voice steady, stripped of its usual bravado. "I thought it was about power, speed, and forcing your will on another man. I went to Arlington to prove that, and I failed, spectacularly." He looked into the eyes of his fighters. "I learned my most important lesson not in the octagon, but on that marble plaza. True strength isn't in your fists. It's in your discipline. It's in your purpose. It's in honoring something bigger than yourself." He took a breath. "Starting today, this gym is launching a new program. Free lifetime memberships for all verified combat veterans. Because it's time we learn from the real warriors. The ones who don't fight for a paycheck, but for each other." A spontaneous, heartfelt applause filled the gym. For the first time in a long time, Leo Vance didn't care if a camera was rolling. He had found a new fight, a new purpose, and miles away, in the hallowed quiet of Arlington, a sentinel marched on. 21 steps, a pause, a turn, a silent guardian, embodying a truth Leo Vance would now carry for the rest of his life. The loudest victories are often meaningless, while the truest power lies in silent, unwavering duty. What do you believe constitutes true strength? Is it the glory achieved under the bright lights, or the unwavering dedication found in the quiet shadows of duty? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's discuss this with the respect it deserves. If this story of honor and humility moved you, share it with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe for more stories that explore the heart of the human spirit. Never forget those who stand watch.